All right. Greetings and welcome. So we'll call it the Eccentric Perspective. Normally, this is the Agree Disagree show. Hello, I'm your host, Blake Walley, or Blake the Eccentric. Testing new equipment and new ideas, I suppose. I usually here with Brian Engelman, the host of Agree to Disagree and the Unhappy Hour, and the the guy who runs the New American Media. So I am going to be manning the ship today. A little fresh content. Brian's not feeling real well, so I am here. We're going to cover the latest news and current events, and have all kinds of fun and laughs and all and all that. So if you would like to participate, throw in a story, help drive the news, please throw a comment on there, and I will do my best to address it and discuss, and we can have delightful banter going back and forth and all that good stuff. All right, so without further ado, a lot of news stories the last couple of days. I'm sorry, testing new equipment. And it's the first time I've used this computer, which is I really like, but the webcam isn't great. I don't know how the lighting is, but it's a work in progress, and we'll figure it out as we go. So why don't we start today with the border? Well, how about headlines first? Bear with me. How about we start with the border disaster going on, and some new statistics that are maybe uncomfortable for some. There's been kind of debate on whether there's an actual crisis on the border or not. And the latest data suggests that there might be a little bit more to what Trump is suggesting. So we can talk about that. We can talk about the latest with Paul Manafort, some disappointing economic news going on. We talk about the latest the Democratic nominees, what's going on there, update there. Got a little bit on R. Kelly, I suppose, Twitter censoring, Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, the Jack Dorsey, and that very interesting interview. People should go check that out. Download that podcast, see what Tim Pool was saying. That was quite a delightful debate. And so why don't we start with, this is out of Breitbart. This is actually out of they're doing a story from the Washington Post talking about how the latest border rush may hit 100,000 immigrants in March. So we've got the cross-border migrant inflow may reach 100,000 people in March, according to the Washington Post. That's a big deal because there's always been this debate whether, what is there really a crisis? Is there anything actually happening down there? And it's been a very contentious issue with and a divided one, with one side saying that there's a crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and the other side saying there's nothing going on. The Democrats say there's everything's fine. I don't know what's the big deal. Why would this be a sudden a big hot topic issue? Why are we shutting the government down? But the data is not so good. So the number of migrants taken into custody last year jumped 39% from February to March, and a similar increase this month would push levels to 100,000 detentions or more. This is what the Washington Post reported on March 4th, 3 days ago. U.S. court restrictions on the government's ability to keep children in immigration jails and the sheer volume of people arriving have left Homeland Security agencies defaulting increasingly to the overflow model Trump deplores as catch and release. So an inflow of 100,000 per month brings migration up towards the levels encouraged by former President George W. Bush before his economic bubble and the 2008 crash. There's an interesting tweet from Nick Miroff saying that the claim that the border crossings are near historic lows is simply no longer true. Yeah, when the Washington Post is forced to admit it, then the narrative has fallen apart. So I guess you got to give kudos to them. February will show another huge increase in families, with some topping 3,000 detentions. We're at levels of unauthorized migration not seen since the Bush administration. Moving on, this is out of the Washington Times. Record arrests of illegal immigrant families on the border bolster Trump's emergency claim. So we've got illegal immigration continues to break records on the southwestern border, and they're not good ones. The number of families snared trying to sneak into the U.S. soared by 50% in 1 month alone, setting an all-time record with more than 36,000 family members apprehended, according to Homeland Security officials. The government has also encountered some 70 groups of at least 100 migrants during the first 5 months of the fiscal year, shattering records and placing new challenges on Border Patrol agents. The many caravans are being funneled to some of the remotest parts of the border, where there is little in the way of medical help, and it takes hours to process and transport the groups. That takes agents off the line, and drug smugglers use the distraction to send across their shipments. And according to the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Kevin McAleenan, he says that we are facing alarming trends. Yeah, President Trump was making a lot of mentions about this as a humanitarian crisis. And the Democrats are saying, where's the problem? Well, yeah, now the statistics are finally out, and we have to face the truth. And what do? So we've got another one. This is out of the Conservative Review, saying new awful data shows that the border invasion is worse than ever. And they're disappointed that Trump threw away his leverage on the when there was the bill going up. The spending bill, I'll get into that. I'll cover a paragraph or two. If Trump had not signed the disastrous budget bill several weeks ago, and we were still operating on a short-term, what does this say? I don't know this abbreviation. With the immigration remaining the top issue, today's news could have strengthened Trump's leverage. You just held out a few more weeks, but of course that was a big problem with people unemployed, the federal workers not getting paid, and that was a huge tragedy, and so they had to work something out. I don't know why they couldn't just put $5 billion in the budget and just give them a partial wall and see if it actually helps or not. And with the $22 trillion debt, what's another $5 billion? But anyway, according to the CBP's preliminary figures obtained by the Washington Post, 76,000 and change illegal aliens were apprehended at the border in February, more than any other month in over a decade since the decline of migration from Mexico. And a record 40,000 family units arrived, blowing out the previous records by almost 10,000. Sadly, Trump already signed away his leverage to force a national dialogue over the issue. And as a nation, we are left debating presidential power from an obscure statute that enables the president to obtain a mere $2.5 billion for partial fencing to deal with a policy-driven invasion. The joke is that even if Trump had full unity behind this approach, it would do little to stop this invasion, which is strategically directed towards soft parts of the border. So unless we force a national discussion over the courts and the illegal immigration magnets that are bringing immigrants in, this entire debate is a non sequitur. And unfortunately, without a budget deadline for another 7 months, no matter how bad things get at our border, there is no mechanism through which to pressure the Democrats into submission. So yeah, that was when the government was shut down and there was a big battle, and if they would have just held out till now, then the Democrats maybe would have been forced to actually deal with reality and that this is actually a humanitarian crisis. But now what are we going to do? And they can sweep this under the rug, but the facts don't lie. And now I'm not sure what's going to happen. So, this is not the proper immigration policy we should be having, as an open border. Good people trying to escape a tough situation. I'd like to help them if possible, but this is not the way it gets done. Back in the day, everybody had to go through Ellis Island and get checked out. Who are you? It'd be nice if these people could come in, get a visa, work, save some money, go back and forth until we can determine who they are. If they're good people, they're welcome to stay. If not, then not. But the policy's a mess, and I don't know what's going to happen going forward. So, but we do know that this is a crisis now and that the numbers don't lie. What's next? Border crisis at the breaking point as unauthorized migrant entries hit 12-year high. This is a full-fledged emergency. This is out of the Independent Journal Review. Yeah, so the situation at the border has reached a breaking point as immigrants coming into the U.S. hit a 12-year high in February. And I don't want to keep repeating information, and we'll try to keep this broadcast relatively short and sweet. And we've got another article, I think this is from today, actually yesterday, 3 times the illegal immigration of 2017 levels at current rate. 3 times. It's because we've taken this as a joke. We're not taking this seriously. So now they're just coming in waves, and there's nothing we can do. So I guess the Democrat, they couldn't spend $5 billion to help build a wall. Just maybe see if it works. If it doesn't, find other methods. They don't have any other solutions, and now we have this. We just let anybody in, and then I guess it'll just sort itself out at some point. I don't really know. Tax the court systems. For years, I don't know, and who these people are, I don't know. Big problem, and I'm not sure what's going to do with it. You're not going to find any solutions from the Democrats. I don't know why. I don't know what the end game is. Maybe do you think these are the future voters? They need to swing things in their favor in 2020. Otherwise, I see no logical reason why this is happening. But maybe with the new data, they'll be forced to acknowledge and do something about it. We hope. Okay, moving on. Oh, and hello, Keith. Yes, the Dems need the illegals vote. Yes, probably right. Maybe you beat me to that, but it seems to be one of the ideas. I don't see any other logical reason. Yeah, I mean, we do want people that come in. If we have a labor shortage in this country, then great. There's a lot of really good people in Mexico. Bring them in. Just find out who they are. They're here from, on their visa for a designated amount of time. They go back, and then they come back to the United States. We go back and forth. We know who they are. They learn the language. They assimilate. They're good people, and we keep them. And we say, hey, yeah, this guy's great. He's been here for years. He does a great job. Let's let him and his family come in. Great. No one should have an issue with that. But it's when they just, we don't know who they are, and they're just running around, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not the way to run the country. And anyway, it's disturbing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad news today, but we'll try to make light of it and wish for the best in the future. This is maybe we'll get a front row seats to what failed policies look like, and then hopefully in the future we'll build something much better. But for right now, I guess we're just enjoying the show, and that's all we can do. Pass the popcorn. Okay, too bad this isn't a movie, though. This is real life. All right, but anyway, let's we can switch topics. Of course, Keith, or if anybody wants to throw an article in there. On next story, we've got as the big headline on Drudge right now, and I'm sure all over the Twitterverse and beyond, and that is the Paul Manafort sentenced to, it says, about 4 years in prison in Virginia case. So Paul Manafort, who once served as President Trump's campaign chairman, was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison Thursday for cheating on his taxes and bank fraud. Spectacular fall for a once high-flying political consultant who told the judge he is now humiliated and ashamed. Manafort had faced up to 24 years in prison under federal sentencing guidelines, but U.S. District Court Judge T.S. Ellis called that calculation excessive and sentenced him instead to 47 months. So I don't know why they're saying sentenced to about 4 years. Yeah, so it's just, I guess, 1 month shy. So we'll see. Does he get good behavior? Does he get out in a couple of years? Or does Trump pardon him? That's going to be another issue. Ellis said the sentence he imposed was more in line with others who had been convicted on similar crimes. Quote, the government cannot sweep away the history of all these previous sentences for similar crimes. So I guess the Democrats get the blood that they wanted. Couldn't find any Russian collusion on the election. But Paul Manafort, who was the campaign chairman for like a couple of months or something, is now, I guess, falling on the sword. So anyway, I'm not going to defend it or anything because he probably did some shady stuff. I'm sure, some of the people in the Trump administration, and maybe Trump himself, do or have engaged in some kind of sketchy stuff. But certainly not the Russian collusion that they were looking for. But Manafort caught up in it, and as they dug trying to find anything, they got their man, and they can put him away for almost 4 years. So congratulations to the Democrats, and now they can parade around and figuratively put Manafort's head on a stake, and we'll lock the door. And throw away the key for a few years unless Trump pardons them. I don't know all of the details, but that is the big breaking news on that front. Okay, we'll switch gears into some going into some other bad news. Unfortunately, that would be on the financial front. We've got Lou Dobbs, who I think is one of the maybe one of the top journalists out there. It's too bad he's not on the bigger platform, but I do appreciate what he does. I haven't watched Fox Business in quite a while, but one of the true good journalists that we've had. He is criticizing President Trump. Normally he's praises him, but I respect Lou for his his honest takes on stuff, and he is got some harsh words, but perhaps well placed. So he's criticizing President Trump about abandoning his America First campaign pledge to restrict foreign workers, and said he fears his administration has lost its way. So here's the quote from Lou. He says, I'd like to share a few thoughts about what I fear is a new direction for the president and his administration, and what could very likely be a catastrophe for the working men and women, small business and entrepreneurs, our middle class, the American family, the very people this president has represented from the moment he announced he would run for the presidency. Dobbs brought up the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board meeting at the White House today, which included a number of CEOs like Tim Cook, and said what America watched unfold was a disastrous policy turn and heartbreaking. Says if this White House thinks that listening to the beguiling prattle of Tim Cook, Tom Donahue, rhino senators like Susan Collins is helpful to this president, then the battle of the forgotten man and woman in this country will be decided by the very establishment that the president ran against. An establishment that spends vast sums of money and energy every single day trying to destroy him and his policies of this historic presidency. And that Mr. Trump would advance the interest of the globalist elites ahead of our citizens would be a tragic reversal on any day. But today, on the same day that the Commerce Department reported the United States had the largest trade deficit in our history, the same day the president of the New York Fed said straightforwardly that economic growth is slowing, that the certain border is being overrun by record numbers of illegal immigrants, it all means the White House has simply lost its way, and that the nation's heart will be, after all, broken by the very same people who brought 50 years of consecutive trade deficit and the export of millions of middle-class jobs, and who have fed the swamp for decades. So you don't want to lose Lou Dobbs, but hey, the truth is the truth. And I don't know exactly what's going on. There's a big problem with the economy. And lot of people are very excited. Trump's a good, the right guy for the job. The problem is he inherited a $20 trillion debt, which is now ballooned to 22. I just think that this mess, the system is too broken for there to be a turnaround within the system itself. And I don't like, when he's meeting with the oligarchs here, trying to get their take on this. And we've got some very disturbing financial numbers. I think the easy solution, of course, would probably be to get rid of the Federal Reserve and just to wipe out this debt and start over. And that's what Iceland did, and they seem to be doing well. Of course, that's a very complicated issue. That's not going to happen in the short term, but hopefully moving forward, because I don't know how you can turn this thing around in the end. We'll move on. So here's out of Bloomberg. You got the U.S. credit card debt closing 2018 at a record $870 billion. So that is a problem. So we can just go into some of these bad numbers. U.S. credit card debt hit $870 billion, largest amount ever as of December 2018, according to data from the Federal Reserve. Credit card balances rose by $26 billion from the prior quarter. Here's a quote. The increase in credit card balances is consistent with seasonal patterns, but marks the first time credit card balances retouched the 2008 nominal peak. That means nearly 480 million credit cards are now in circulation, up by more than 100 million since hitting bottom after the recession a decade ago. Okay, we'll move on. U.S. households are seeing the biggest decline in net worth since the financial crisis. That's not good. This is out of CNBC. So Americans' net worth fell at the highest level since the financial crisis in the fourth quarter of 2018, as sliding stock market prices ate into the household balance sheet. Net worth dropped to $104.3 trillion as the year came to an end, a decrease of $3.73 trillion from the third quarter, according to figures released Thursday by the Federal Reserve. The fall amounted to a drop of 3.4%. So much of the slide came due to Wall Street, as the stock market suffered a precipitous decline that started in October and briefly reached bear market status. And who knows? I mean, I think the stock market seems pretty inflated to begin with. It's a matter of time before I guess we see some kind of a correction. And I guess that's kind of looming over. So for all of the good data, maybe we have the right guy for the job. I don't know how you turn this mess around, because it's been papered over so much and inflated and manipulated with quantitative easing and such. I think we have a opportunity to rebound, but there's going to have to be some major changes. And I think the Federal Reserve needs to go if we're ever going to have a hot economy again, and maybe have something that makes sense. I got one more. This is from the economic collapse. Oh, and thank you, Keith. Sorry, I'm not got two open windows on my Chrome, so I'm not running all my articles on one screen, and I got the YouTube screen on a separate tab here, because I think most of Manafort's crimes took place in 2006. Yeah, that could be true. A lot of it is in the past, but the Democrats were in this investigation digging into everything. And they're going way back, and now these committees are trying to get like the last 10 years of financial data from Trump, and they're going to just find something and use that as a reason to impeach Trump, I guess. It's pretty sad that, not saying that Manafort's a good guy, but he got caught up in this. He had spent very little time with the administration. He was just there as some kind of a special, and then they needed him in 2016 for the election. And then he got dragged into this Miller investigation, and maybe he does deserve to be punished. I'm not sure, but it's too bad that it's old stuff from the past that they're going to use to smear Trump. 10 years later, it doesn't seem fair. So thank you. Yeah, good point. Getting back to this bad financial data, We've got 18 really big numbers that show that the U.S. economy is starting to fall apart very rapidly. You've got farm loan delinquencies just hit the highest level in 9 years. U.S. exports declined by $4 billion in December. You got J.C. Penney closing 24 stores, Victoria's Secret closing 53 stores. Yeah, retail is dead for the, it's all going online. Gap, Payless, Shoe Source. They declared bankruptcy, closing 2,100 stores. Yeah, because you've got stuff like Zappos, which is cool. I've actually gone to the Zappos headquarters in Las Vegas and I've bought stuff from there. They're cool. I used to get stuff at Payless, but they never seem to have the selection. I mean, this is probably just going to be the way of the future. But you do want to go, see stuff and go to the mall. I still like going to the mall once in a while, but it's getting a lot tougher to survive in the days of Amazon. Moving on, Tesla closing all of their physical sales locations. They're only going to be online. I guess Pepsi is laying off workers. Speaking of that, I had an article about MGM that actually affects me. I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to see. Actually, maybe I'll pull that up on my Facebook. I know Brian sent me that line. They're replacing bartenders with robots in the service bars. Let me see here. I'm going to have to see if I can find that data. It's going to be all automated. And that's another big thing that's going to be happening is robots replacing workers. And that hits close to home because that's a lot of stuff that I did for years. I worked for MGM for 15 years, and I actually worked a service bar exclusively for 2.5 years. And now they would have, if I would have continued to stay there, they would have ended up replacing me with robots. Isn't that odd? Or not really. I guess that's the way it's going to go. Getting back to some of these data, you've got existing homes, values are falling. U.S. housing starts were down 11%. Home sales in Southern California down 17%. Home sales in the United States have fallen on a year-over-year basis, 13 months in a row. Oh, not to mention that we've talked about credit card debt, but now you've got $166 billion in student loan debt. That's another big scam. More than 7 million Americans behind on their auto loan payments. Oh, that's another one that's close to home. I actually had to sell my truck on eBay recently because I was behind on. That's another side issue. Yeah, I've just moved to LA here, is trying to start things over. And that after a rough couple of years, I think everybody had a rough 2018. It was not good to me. But anyway, that's a side issue, perhaps. So, but yeah, I've felt the pain, man. I've gone through this stuff. So not good. But I guess that's the financial data. We'll go to MGM Resorts. They're replacing bartenders with machines. And I guess I can see where they're at. They're not doing great financially, and it's too bad to see that. MGM was a great company to work for. I did 15 years split between MGM and New York. It was a great experience. I had nothing bad to say about the company. But I figured with the loss of revenue that it was probably inevitable to happen. And I liked working for them and being in the union, and it was a good gig. It was tough to leave, but it was time for a change of scenery. But I guess this isn't a huge surprise to me. And it's too bad with Vegas. That's another thing that should be changed going forward. Talk about wiping out debt and starting over. Vegas used to be a cool place where you could get, drinks on the cheap and go get restaurants and shows and enjoy yourself. But now it's since the corporations, I'm not going to say it's all the corporations, but back in the mob days, I'd hear about that. They didn't care about making money on food and beverage. They made all their money on table games, and now they make most of their money on the slot machines. And now they jack you everywhere. They jack you for the drinks. They jack you for the restaurants are super expensive. The shows are really expensive, and they charge you for parking now. It's not what it used to be. It's sad. I wish they would fix that. But yeah, it just goes into that whole financial crisis. So I mean, it's at some point it's going to be time to hit the big reset button and start everything over, because this doesn't kind of work for us going forward. Unless it's, of course, the Federal Reserve and the oligarchs would like to keep things the way they are, but that's just not good for the rest of us. All right, moving on. I think maybe I can touch on this some more. MGM is going to be trying to save $300 million, with $100 million of that coming from savings on labor costs. They're going to get rid of a lot of executives expected to take voluntary resignation packages, and then they're going to try to make some more money through automation and technology. Yeah, they need to cut some of these pay, because I think some of these executives are making just umpteen millions a year. It's ridiculous. I think they could take a haircut. I don't think some of these people need to be making $15 million a year. Maybe they can make $3 million a year. Is that enough? And 12. That's a lot of savings right there. Maybe keep some of the bartenders. I mean, it's an unusual job. Maybe not the most healthy environment anyway. But that's too bad. And I feel bad because there's a lot of good people I know personally that are involved that are going to get hit with this. And if I was still there, I would have certainly been hit with this. MGM is a huge casino. So they have a lot of service bars. That's a lot of shifts. That's a lot of people that are going to get bumped. And it's seniority just kind of rolling down and affecting a lot of people. So that's too bad. But I guess, again, no surprise. But it's another big issue we can get to another time. So moving on, we'll just touch up on a few of the other stories of the day. Of course, it was the reality check on the border crisis. We've had the tough truth with the what's going on with the economy. It's not so good. Now we can move over to the latest with the Democratic nominees. So, Trump has been criticized and has certainly has some issues to deal with. I still see a landslide election in 2020, because I haven't really seen much from a Democratic field so far. There's maybe a couple of intriguing candidates with Tulsi Gabbard and Howard Schultz, but the rest of the field I don't think stands much of a chance, including Joe Biden here, who is apparently all in. He's almost all in on 2020, but worries about Trump's take no prisoners approach. Yeah, Joe's going to get floored. He's a gaffe machine, so I don't know how he's going to go toe to toe with Trump. But former VP Joe Biden almost totally prepared to announce his bid for the White House, according to media reports. That's just one big thing keeping him from pulling the trigger. Concerns that President Donald Trump will play too rough during the general campaign. Well, Biden's chief strategist, Steve Ricchetti, is signaling that the Delaware Democrat is about 95% committed to running. Officials connected to the former VP told the New York Times on Thursday there are several issues tossing a monkey wrench into Biden's plans. However, chief among them is a concern that Trump will exploit his personal life. Well, it seems like Democrats have gone pretty hard at Trump's personal life, dragging out Stormy Daniels and his, that dirty laundry, going after the kids. I mean, I'm not saying it's fair game, but I guess, it's if you're going to dish it, you got to take it. And Biden's kind of a creepster. So I'm sure he's just better off. Why does he just fade away? I don't know why he thinks that he has any chance of getting involved here. He's a 76-year-old, kind of a goofball VP. And I don't really see this as being a very a serious run. He certainly didn't. He had a better chance in 2016, but did not. And apparently, the focus groups also agree that they're rejecting Biden. This is from CNN. This is actually off the Hill, saying the CNN focus group comprised of Democratic voters has rejected former VP Joe Biden as their presidential nominee. Focus group's dismissal of Biden is notable since the former VP, who is expected to join the Democratic primary soon, has been leading a number of public opinion polls and is seen as the potential frontrunner. Democrats gathered by CNN, however, said they weren't interested in Biden. Some said they wanted a candidate who was further to the left. Here's a quote from one of the Democratic voters says, "I think we need a bold, strong leadership, and you'll find that in the progressives." So, and then we had, what is this? We had the standard bearer for the kind of pragmatic centrist candidate in Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump is now president. He is not your above average political candidate, so we really need to try to think outside the box because, it seems like the dude is made of rubber. Anything you throw at him just bounces off, and there's nothing that sticks. So, yeah, it's kind of a sad group here. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and some very radical leftists. Or, of course, you get another centrist, Amy Klobuchar, but I don't know who they're going to throw out there that's going to do something so far. So moving on, you've got Michael Bloomberg was kind of thrown around as a potential candidate, but he will not run for president. There'd be another billionaire in there. He says he's clear-eyed about the difficulty of winning the nomination in such a crowded field. And he wrote that he would expand his environmental philanthropy and announced the launch of a new project, Beyond Carbon, that he described as a grassroots effort to begin moving America as quickly as possible from the oil and gas and toward a 100% clean energy economy. Well, that's a noble cause, but I'm not a big fan of Bloomberg, so he's another one that's he's 77. Interesting enough guy, but he is not going to run officially. And also Hillary Clinton. She says, "I'm not running." She rules out her 2020 bid for the first time in an exclusive interview. This is News 12 out of Westchester. Hillary Clinton ruled out a 2020 presidential run for the first time, pledging instead to take an active role by working with the candidates in the crowded Democratic field. She says, "I'm not running, but I'm going to keep on working and speaking and standing up for what I believe." And in her first interview since the midterms, the former First Lady and Secretary of State opened up about 2016, 2020, and beyond, expressing deep concerns about the state of the American politics today and vowed to be vocal about those concerns. Like she really cares about the little people. But anyway, she's not going to be there. But I was looking forward to that. I think Trump was also looking forward to a lot of that people just to finally push her out of her misery. But she is done. And speaking of misery, we will switch topics here. Well, we'll see if any new commenters. We do not. So on the next subject is R. Kelly breaks down on a interview. He was very passionate and animated, but I don't think the people bought it. And he had a couple people, important people, call him out that were close to him. So that's not good. So forget the Grammys. R. Kelly should be up for an Oscar after his over-the-top performance during Gayle King's interview. So says one of the first women to speak out about Kelly's alleged sexual abuse. Sparkle, who the singer who had a hit song with R. Kelly in 1998, was on TMZ Live Thursday. That would be, this afternoon? And said the real reason Kelly's losing it on camera is because it's all getting too real. Translation, he's staring down the possibility of hard time in prison and he's terrified. Yeah, I think I would agree. And as you know, Kelly wore his emotions on his sleeve in his first interview since being arrested on 10 counts of aggravated sexual abuse, looking distraught and exploding in tears. All of that coming the day before he got locked up in Cook County Jail again for failure to pay child support. Is he in jail again? He finally got out. He spent a few days in there before some lady who ran a daycare and owned a few restaurants in Chicago decided to bail him out. And I mean, yeah, the guy's pretty desperate, but I don't know who he's trying to fool. He's been in his own bubble running his cult for so long. He's out of touch with reality with the rest of us. And a couple of people that were close to him are kind of throwing him under the bus. So Sparkle says it's just another example of R. Kelly treating life like a stage. But she says it's time he learns one very important lesson. Yeah, man, I don't think that's going to work out for him. Monster, and he probably, I'm not saying he's guilty, but there's some videotapes and he's got quite a history, so I don't think he's got a leg to stand on, and he might be doing some hard time, and I can't say I feel too bad for him. It's done some pretty horrible things to some of these victims, so see if he gets the justice he deserves. The next important person was his attorney. I can't completely verify this, but singer R. Kelly's former attorney says he was guilty as hell years ago. So, former attorney for R. Kelly, let's see, his name is Genson, Ed Genson. So he says he's former attorney Ed Genson, who has been facing for R. Kelly, of course, has been facing charges of engaging in sexual acts with minors, says the singer was guilty as hell when he faced similar charges years prior. Because I don't think he's done anything inappropriate for years, but he says, I'll tell you a secret. I had him go to a doctor to get shots, libido-killing shots. That's why he didn't get arrested for anything else. Isn't that interesting? So the guy's can't control his urges, so he had to get shots for that. That's interesting. I heard Tesla back in the day was used to did some kind of chemical castration of sorts so he wouldn't be tempted by his urges, his human urges, and that's okay. But anyway, it's a side issue. But curious if they have something like that. I wasn't aware that they could do that, but maybe he should have stayed on it, apparently, because he just kept getting himself into trouble. And I guess when you get that much money and power, and you can tempt some of these young women into your cult or whatever the heck it was, and now it's not going so well for him. And it was certainly an interesting interview to watch the other day. But yeah, I guess the regular America wasn't buying it, and looks like it's the end. Now he's in problem with child support on top of that. Yeah, sorry, Kelly, but looks like you're going into the pokey, and not too many people are going to care. But you did it to yourself, and I guess that's why it's really going to hurt. Anyway, moving on. Anybody else? Any other comments? Of course, I'll probably cut this short. We're already at 43 minutes. Probably not going to spend too much time unless somebody wants to post an article or drive something. Anything anybody wants to discuss, feel free to throw something here. Hey, John. And otherwise, we'll cut it out. And if you guys want to check out the replay, please do. We'll start probably putting more content out. I'd like to do this stuff a lot earlier. Brian is not feeling too well today. We usually run the Agree to Disagree show, but today I'm going to fly solo. We'll call it the Eccentric Perspective. I used to do this show for a long time. Ran a podcast for years on Freedomizer, but now we're trying to work out the equipment, and I'm not too terribly happy with my webcam and such, but we're still trying to work out the bugs and trying to work out doing multiple people in multiple locations, but we'll get that. We need a good engineer or someone that can help us through with these with this equipment, get this stuff down, and then we can start firing out daily content again, which will be awesome as we step things up for the New American Media in 2019. But thank you for being here and bearing with us. I guess the last couple of stories I'll talk about. We've got Project Veritas slamming the Twitter executive's spying claims. Yeah, they were kind of busted on the Joe Rogan show, and Tim Pool did a phenomenal job holding them accountable for what they're doing, censoring conservatives. It's clearly a one-sided deal, and you had Jack Dorsey, and I got to give credit to Jack and the attorney he had on there, Vijaya Gade. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. They were talking. There's multiple things that were problematic, and it was good to see Tim Pool, putting the pressure on them to try to admit that they were censoring, and it was heavy-handed, and it didn't make any sense, and that it was predominantly conservatives that were being censored. And Brian and I have had problems on Twitter as well. I used to have a lot of fun there, but it's not so fun anymore when I'm getting shadow banned and I have no voice. I fail to see a reason to get on there these days until something happens and they can make it an even playing field again. But anyway, one of the things they were busted on was for saying that they weren't looking at private messages, when it's clear that Project Veritas talked to a couple of people that were within Twitter who blew the whistle and said that they look at dick pics all the time. There's all kinds of stuff going on. They've got hundreds of employees that are going through private messages. And then, of course, Jack and his attorney are saying that, we're not looking at these direct messages. So, and a kudos to getting his name, calling them out from Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, sorry. So Twitter founder Jack Dorsey and Chief Legal Officer Vijaya told podcast host Joe Rogan that direct messages on the social media site are not monitored, a claim challenged by investigative journalist James O'Keefe. When asked by Rogan if company employees read direct messages, Dorsey replied, "We don't read direct messages." And then his lawyer followed up, explaining that the only direct messages read by employees are those which have been reported to Twitter support. Now, that's the way it should be, but that's not really the case. Rogan pressed further, asking if it was possible for Twitter employees to intentionally peruse a user's direct messages, to which the attorney replied, "I don't think so." That's a kind of a lawyer answer. Not very convincing. And however, according to multiple Twitter engineers who discussed the subject of direct messages with undercover Project Veritas journalists, Dorsey and his attorney may have been misleading with their answers at best. There's actually teams dedicating to reading direct messages, according to Clay Haynes, that is a senior network security engineer at Twitter. I don't think they blew the whistle. I think this was actually an undercover operation that they caught him on camera talking about. He says he means we're talking at least 300 or 400 people, and they're paid to look at dick pics. He says that it's creepy, it's Big Brother. And another engineer, no, it's actually the direct messaging engineer, Pranay Singh, revealed that all content shared on the platform, including private messages, are stored on Twitter servers for analytical and advertising purposes. That's pretty creepy. So all your sex messages and your dick pics are on my server now, he said. Everything, anything you post online, a machine is going to look at it. An algorithm will look at it, and they'll make a virtual profile about you. Yeah, so good job there. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely download that show. Tim Pool absolutely killed it. And kudos to Joe Rogan. And, of course, thanks to Jack Dorsey for having the courage to go and face the music. And Tim has another good video today. I'll post that on Twitter I'm sure it won't get much traction there, but you can go check it out at Eccentric99 because he calls out saying Twitter could be a dying platform because the censorship's going to come back and bite them. And I was making a mention of that. Brian and I covered this in detail on yesterday's show, going over the entire interview. So you should really go check that out. Sorry, I think I forgot the other point I was going to make on that, but we'll about wrap up the show. On one good note, I think it's been kind of a rough day today with some of that disturbing news, but sometimes that's what it is. Unfortunately, good days, bad days, and today, but at least we got to face it and deal with the reality. Last story I'll touch upon, unless somebody has something to share, would be Physicians and Surgeons, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons denouncing mandatory vaccines, citing that there's no rigorous safety studies. So this is out of Natural News. With vaccine fanaticism having now turned into a dangerous left-wing medical cult, it's refreshing to hear a medical organization denouncing the dangerous idea of mandatory vaccines. Recently, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, an organization that supports vaccines in general, publicly denounced the pursuit of mandatory vaccination enforcement, correctly stating that there are no rigorous safety studies demonstrating vaccine safety. The full statement from the AAPS is enlightening. And so they're reprinting the whole thing on this article, but I won't read it here, but that is interesting. I know there's a lot of people who get very passionate about the vaccine stuff, but I think mandatory vaccines is a step too far, no matter how you feel about it. If people want to get vaccinated, I don't see why they're worried about whether other people don't. And I think forcing them, especially when we can't really prove a whole lot of the efficacy with some of them, especially like flu vaccines and such, I think a lot of them are probably not necessary and that the science is debatable. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get any, but saying people should be allowed to do their own research and do what they think is best for themselves and their children. Anywho, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thank everybody for listening to the Eccentric Perspective. And we'll see what happens. Yeah, the New American Media is going to be stepping up a lot of stuff this year. Try to put out a lot more content and cover a lot of the interesting news that you're not going to see anywhere else. So again, thank you. Stay tuned. Please subscribe. Follow us. You can follow me on Twitter, Eccentric99. And of course, New American Media is American_media_. Yeah, subscribe to us on YouTube. Please like, share, and stay tuned for more because it's going to get better from here. So, all right, that's all I've got. Peace. I'm out. Thank you, and have a wonderful day and weekend.